So basically I took these three pieces here, which is what you'll be given. I drew them, I modeled them, and then we worked forward. We're going to go back to the invoice. Design and lay out 6 sides with air inlet holes. I put an hour on this. It probably didn't take that long. It probably took 25-30 minutes. But I found somewhat of a decent pattern. I looked at what size was there and tried to make them uniform going across there. Right? Now, if I wanted to put in like a stars or some other type of geometry or shape and design within this, then this 1 hour may go up even further. As we look at, when I just looked at the main body, when we start tracing and putting a customized logo within our fire pit, then like right in through here, we're going to have a lot of time on the AutoCAD. So sometimes we want to try to make sure that we explain to the customers that as well. Say if we do a simple type design, or we do one every other piece, then I only have to design 2 different pieces. If you want 8 different logos on all 8 sides of this polygon, it's going to take a lot of time for CAD work. Okay, and that's where some of the new software programs have really sped some stuff up. Okay, we're going to go back to design the top burner of the box edges. I call these the flanges in the parts list, right? And so at this point, a lot of my CAD material is done. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 hours in the CAD work and knowing what type of material I need. Okay, which is huge, because if on my parts list, when I come back over here, what I could do is I can get a lot more in detail of saying this is my part number or description, and then in this description I could put 10 gauge cold rolled material. Okay. Now, if this is 10 gauge, if everything's 10 gauge, then I can do it all off of one sheet. But say one section's 10 gauge, this piece is 14 gauge, keep the weight down, and then our base plate is 3/16 hot rolled or cold rolled, then we're going to have to start figuring out different material costs as well. Okay, and then this will help us when we start putting those specs in for our materials and breaking down the cost of the product on top of our labor also. Okay, but if you handed this to a fabricator or a CNC plasma person, then they easily know where it goes. And this should be, you should be making a parts list for everything you do, just like you did in the first year. You're going to break these pieces down, that way you know the angles, the dimensions, and they can cut it out and start assembling it. So it's kind of like a traveler. Sometimes when you're going down a production line, you'll have a traveler, which is all the paperwork that goes with that part. So you can hand it off, say you're the person that does the CNC plasma, you're done plasmaing them, you got a laborer that comes over and deburrs them, grinds them, cleans them off, and acetones them if they're in aluminum, right? So they're going to come over, they're going to grab the traveler and all these parts, take that with them. Once they're done with them, then they'll move it to the next person who might be the fitter, right? And the fitter will fit it up, and naturally he'll need the other parts of the blueprint as well. And this one kind of becomes mundane at that point because everybody else should have done their job. All right. So we're down to here. Nest drawings to minimize material cost. Oh, absolutely. Sometimes the software will do it for you yourself. Sometimes you'll have to look at it and decide what type of piece of material you have. Maybe you only have maybe you got a quarter of a sheet with some odd designs cut out of it, kind of a skeleton-like piece that you can cut a lot of this stuff out of. You might have to redraw that, measure it out, redraw it on your CAD system, and then put these pieces in there to minimize it, especially on a custom one. Okay. And then next we go to the create parts list and blueprint. So I've created the parts list, and if I wanted to, I can model it. In this case, we had a blueprint for it, but you will be creating a blueprint for this as well, showing how it goes together other than just the parts print. Okay. Load material on CNC plasma and cut out. This is the one that everybody always seems to overlook. It takes time to be able to go out to the yard, grab the right material, load it on the material, cut it all out, change the electrodes and everything else, put it in the material, or load it into the software program, your plasma, cut it out, and then you have to pull all these pieces, and if they're on a water table, you clean them off, and you have to let them dry, and then you acetone and clean them, all those other things. This could be right here into this CNC plasma. Everybody just thinks that sheet hops up on the plasma table for you, and that's not exactly true. This is where most people start to hurt some time and money, particularly when it comes to plasma, is they forget to put in here that in order to keep a well-run or maintained clean shop, you want to be able to do this. Deburr fit and tack up assembly. If you're going to create a jig and fixture, if you're doing more than that, this one might take a little bit more time. So you want to make sure that that jig and fixture is set up to where you just basically line the pieces up, and the next person can make the next 100 welds or 100 pieces without having to recreate another jig or a fixture. And then after it's there, you got to weld out while weld sequencing to control distortion. And this one as well. You make sure you relay this to your client before they get there. Tell them, you know, this is thin material or it's got some tolerances. It's going to take a little bit of time to weld out so that it doesn't distort and warp as we go. Okay. And then here at the end, when you're done with this, everything's proven, it works out fine. Then you create the DXF files for the reproduction piece. So we've got 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 and a half, 12 and a half, 13 and a half, 14 and a half, 15 and a half hours into this first one-off piece. And if we come down here, our next one for a production run, all that's already done. I could even on that parts list, when I get on the blueprint, this is just the parts list, but when I create the blueprint, I'll put the weld call outs of what size of weld. You know, maybe I'm only doing 2 inches here. See, those are 3.3, so maybe I'm doing 1 inch here, 1 inch here, and that's sufficient enough to be able to hold it within place, right? So I want to make sure to add those details as well when I'm looking and building my blueprint, so that way the fabricator is not wondering, well, how am I supposed to be able to put this all together? Where should the welds be? What size of weld should they be? What's the profile? And in this case, it doesn't necessarily apply to a D11 code, but we want to make sure that it's welded together very well, right? We don't want to fall apart as our customers outside enjoying their evening with fire pit there, okay? So back to the second production of fire pit burner box assembly. You know, gather the parts list and blueprints, plasma the parts, and excuse me, deburr fit up. Excuse me, tack and weld out. So, you know, we've got 6 hours into this versus, I forget what we said a few minutes ago we had into this one. I think it was close to 15. So we saved 9 hours worth of time. And when this also tells us within this 6 hour period, the welder, if they're a separate person, the welder themselves is only have 4 hours into it. So they should be able to crank 2 of these out a day. So that also helps me as the estimator and the business owner saying, hey, we got 100 of these. My estimated time for our project to be done for all 100 of them should be, you know, I'm going to say 4 hours, 2 a day for, you know, 20 days a week, or sorry, 20 days a month. You know, that's 80. We should be 5 weeks out. 5 weeks out is when your estimated product should arrive, okay, or be done. And then we may have to throw in some other things at the end of it, but that's just a burner box assembly. Remember, this is piece 1 of 4 in this project. But hopefully you understand now as you fill these out, just to kind of go a little bit more in detail, give me a little better idea of what's going to happen, and then you start to learn as the welder and the fabricator as well, where can you cut corners, and if you do a good job on this first one, you're going to save a lot of money on these production parts, okay? All right, that's the end of this video for planning, the starting planning stages of this. We will be doing this for every part of the fire pit that we do, and we will continue to work forward. Thank you very much and have a nice day.